takes us on a heroic and transformational journey into deeper dimensions of who we are and who we are here to be on this planet. And so today we're going to be looking at the 3 transformations that we have the opportunity to embrace if we wish to fulfill on the promise of our dreams of future as a published author. So first of all, is everybody familiar with Joseph Campbell's The Hero's Journey? Is that something people know about? I'm in the right place. Yeah, Steve, I know you and I have talked about that, and Laura, it looks like you're familiar with that as well. Well, that's something that I happen to think is pretty cool, and I'm going to share my screen. I do have some notes here that I'm happy to play with here. The hero's journey, there are steps in the hero's journey story arc. Joseph Campbell was an author, an editor, a philosopher, I think, in a lot of ways, and a literature professor. And he looked at the place of myth in our stories. And he wrote a powerful book called The Hero of a Thousand Faces. And it's a famous book. I can recommend that one if you're looking for something that really looks deeply at archetypes and mythology and all those interesting aspects of what we're doing here as human beings. It's a really, really famous book. And The Hero of a Thousand Faces combined aspects of psychology with aspects of myth. And so it's pretty interesting to take a look at that. The hero's journey story arc is commonly used in screenwriting. And so a lot of movies that we know about have taken these steps in the hero's journey as a roadmap for writing the storyline of the narrative. So if you've seen Harry Potter, the Harry Potter movies, they follow the hero's journey story arc. And Spider-Man is another one where the screenwriters very seriously looked at the hero's journey and stepped the story right through all of these 12 steps of the hero's journey. I think The Lion King was another one where we can pretty easily mark out all of the very discrete steps in the hero's journey. And so it's quite a famous story arc. Well, I stumbled across something that I think is actually even more relevant. And I was a little bit mischievous when I titled this talk, because there's something even better than the hero's journey in my model of the world. And that's something called, I'm going to make you wait for that one. It's, did I share that? I'm not sure I shared. Was I sharing my screen just a minute ago? No. Okay. Then I better go back and do that because that was relevant. Here are the steps in the hero's journey. Whoops, backing up a little bit. They actually go on a physical adventure. And in the act of going on a physical adventure, the hero finds new dimensions of themselves, and there's a transformation involved. And so there is something I stumbled upon. I was about to tell you, and I just think this is breathtaking. There was a lady a couple of decades ago by the name of Kim Hudson, who was in screenwriter school. And of course, in screenwriting school, they study the hero's journey because that's a very important roadmap to writing a great screenplay for movies. And so as she was learning about the hero's journey story arc, she got thinking about it. And so she turned to her professor and she said, okay, this is great. This is the hero's journey. But what about the female counterpart to the hero's journey storyline? Like what's the women's piece in all of this, or the feminine counterpart to the hero's journey? And apparently the professor looked at her with a very puzzled look on his face and said point blank, well, women don't do anything interesting. There is no such thing. And as you can imagine, Kim Hudson just went, are you kidding me? And they were fighting words, and off she went. And she explored every story she could get her hands on that involved a female heroine. And she looked at mythology, and she studied the Bible, and every work of great literature that she could find. She went and she analyzed the different steps in these storylines. And there's a picture of Kim Hudson there. She came up after all of this research with something called the Virgin's Promise. And the Virgin's Promise is, it's not that it's the women's story, it is the feminine aspect. It's to be a counterpart to the hero's journey. But there are actually 13 steps in the Virgin's Promise storyline. A virgin, there isn't necessarily a lot of journeying in a Virgin's Promise storyline. It's much to the character internally. And some of the stories that you may know of that Kim Hudson has identified as following a Virgin's Promise storyline are the Brokeback Mountain, that movie. Some of you may have seen Brokeback Mountain. The Matrix, Neo goes on a Virgin's Promise storyline. The Princess Bride is another one with Wesley. I love The Princess Bride, but I think that's one of the best movies ever made. I think it's hysterical. And The Wedding Crashers is another one. So I want to incorporate both of these story ideas, these storylines in my work. I think they're both really valid. They're quite different in sometimes subtle ways, but they each involve transformations. And in my work, I've identified that there are actually 3 transformations. As we are becoming authors and writers of our stories, we are looking at 3 main transformations. The first one is a transformation in our sense of who we think we are. Because in becoming an author, and I work with authors specifically as a book coach and an editor, so that's really where my main interest lies, is helping people become those authors. But I've identified, okay, we have to change who we think we are in the process of becoming an author, because when we start writing those books, we're not yet an author, and that often will get in people's way, because I don't think I'm an author yet. How can I write this book? Because who am I to become an author? Like, who do I think I am? And that really is the question. Who do you think you are? And that's one of the big transformations that takes place when we're becoming an author, is who do we think we are? The second one is a transformation in our expectations of our future. That's another really important one. And then the third transformation that I've identified is a transformation in our sense of community and our place in it. And I think those are 3 really important transformations that are common to both the hero's journey and the Virgin's Promise storyline. So that's really the context of what I'm going to be sharing with you today. And I want to start with one little thing. And I learned this little game. Does everybody like a game, by the way? Game's good? Okay. So I play a little game at the beginning of all of the programs that I run, and it's called What's Your Word? And I invite everybody to just stop for a minute and seat yourself in yourself and figure out what one word summarizes how you're feeling right now, and put it in the chat box. How do you feel? What's the main emotion that you're experiencing right now? Happy, eager, good one. I put in there elated, joyful. That's a really good one. I really like doing this little exercise. I learned this from my friend Jennifer Huff, who runs programs that are all about personal evolution and personal transformation. And what I love about identifying how we feel is that when we're writing anything, whether it's a book, a collection of short stories, one short story, an essay, we want to become familiar with the vocabulary of emotion. We live in a world where I think people have become separated from how they feel a lot. We aren't really in touch with our feelings as much as we might have been 1,000 years ago. And I believe that part of the job of a writer is to help your readers connect with their feelings, with their emotional side of who they are. And so the more we can practice identifying how we feel, the better able we're going to be to help other people connect with how they feel too. And so becoming more, what's the word, expressive about emotion is a really important part of becoming an author. And I think that the really best books don't actually make us think something. So they don't fill our heads with knowledge. The very best books make us feel something. And so as authors, the more familiar we can be with emotions and communicating those emotions, the stronger we're going to be in connecting with our readers. And so this is just a little game I like to play is, okay, what's your word? So everybody in any of my programs, that I run a number of online programs for people who are writing books, that's where we start. And often that's where we finish too, because just as any story arc takes readers on an adventure from one place to another, and we need to see in the character's journey a change in their state and who they are. We also change that as in the course of our writing. So we want to be able to take our readers on that journey, and we also want to experience that ourselves. It's kind of fun. And so I'd love to, actually, I'm going to ask your permission. Can I tell you a story? Is it okay if I tell you? Okay. So once upon a time, and this isn't all that many years ago, probably about 3 years ago, I got an opportunity to go to Costa Rica. And I had been to Costa Rica once before, but I had missed out in fulfilling a lifelong dream of going ziplining. And so in this trip to Costa Rica, I was determined I was going to go ziplining. So I got together with a couple of girlfriends who were on this trip with me and convinced them we need to go ziplining, and off we went. And I have to tell you, it was the most fulfilling experience of my whole life. It was fun. We got to fly through these beautiful trees on a gorgeous, hot, sunny day, and there were birds and not too many animals, but we were out in nature, and I was just in heaven because it was so much fun. And that, that was kind of the pinnacle of the experience. That was supposed to be, the best part was going to be the ziplining. But as we were wandering through the trail that led from one tree to the next, and then there'd be a little path connecting different areas of where we wanted to go, the guides who we were with, they passed this sign that said Tarzan swing. And the guides said, oh, we have to stop here. And I didn't know what a Tarzan swing was, as who knows what a Tarzan swing. You kind of get a visual with that one. But we went down this little path, and we came to a hut built into the side of this one tree. And it was really high off the ground. And it was just this very little hut. There was enough space for maybe 4 of us to stand in it. It was wood. And at the front of the hut was this very flimsy little gate that looked out over nothing, like space. We were way high up in the trees. And I obviously wasn't too scared of heights, or I wouldn't have been ziplining to begin with. But when I looked kind of over the edge, I thought, holy cow, that's a long way down. And as I'm looking from the back of the hut out to the front, one of the guides started buckling me into this big harness thing. There were buckles here and buckles there and ropes, and he was tightening ropes and things like that. And there were straps going around my legs. And I said, whoa, 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 what are you doing? And the guide said, oh, this is the Tarzan swing. You're going to go do the Tarzan swing. And I said, not on your life. That is suicide. I am not going to do that. And he thought that was really funny. And he said, well, it's easy. You just sit down. And I thought, well, I'm not sure that sounds easy to me. Easy for him, maybe. But I'll show you what happened next. So I kept saying no. He kept laughing. I kept saying, no, really, no, I don't want to do this. He kept laughing. He said, no, just sit down. And then here's what happened. And I hope you can see this. Sometimes this doesn't come across very well, but I will make that go big. And
oh, shit. Oh my God.
Now you know what it is.
Oh my God. I don't know if I can do that. No. I'm not ready for that commitment. Not ready for that kind of commitment. I have to find out what she's feeling.
Okay.
Okay, so I did it. And I was so scared. But the few, I know, wasn't I brave, right? Like that was just, I can't believe I did that. And I didn't know that the Tarzan swing was going to be part of my ziplining experience. I could not have predicted that. But it showed up, and it turned out to be one of the most exciting, exhilarating things I have ever done in my entire life. And I'm so glad now that I did it. But I liken that to writing a book. or even a series of short stories, or whatever your creative project is, it can be pretty scary to take that leap. And along the way of writing those stories or that book or whatever it is you're working on, there are going to be surprise opportunities that come up that might terrify you, such as doing a public reading of one of your stories. Maybe before you're ready to do a public reading, maybe before you're even published, you might get the chance to do a reading. That's a scary thing to do. And I know, because I remember doing my first public reading from one of my books. But these are the things that actually lead you to something bigger, something better, something brighter for you and the work you're here to do in the world. So the second point I want to make about that little story is, even if you're engaged in something that you've wanted to do for a long time, writing a book, for example, can feel like a huge leap into the unknown. And it can be terrifying at times to be working on a book or a collection of stories. And yet when you get right down to it, you are actually completely safe. It's not like stepping off the edge of a little hut up in the trees and then the ground is gone from underneath you. Writing a book, actually, you're usually sitting in a chair in a safe place to write a book. So the fear is in here. It's not in our external world. And we create these fears out of the unfamiliar. So I invite everybody to take those steps that unfold for you. They're right in front of you. And it's just a question of embracing the change that you're there to do. So you can see there was transformation involved in my Tarzan swing story, right? Like that jump, that Tarzan swing required me to step into a different sense of who I thought I was in that experience. It really does speak to that first transformation of transforming our sense of who we are. In order for me to do the Tarzan swing, I had to step out of being the person who never does that kind of silly thing into, oh my gosh, I'm the kind of person who does that kind of thing, I guess. So it's very exciting, and it's something that we can bring forward with us into everything we do, particularly into our writing. I also want to share a few other little things. I want to talk about me a little bit. I suppose you might want to know a little bit about who I am. There we go. Getting caught up with my slides here. And from current slide, there we go. So there we go. So you see that little red dot there? That's where I was born. I'm a Canadian. I was born up near the border between Northern Ontario and Manitoba. Manitoba is part of the Western Prairie provinces in Canada. And little tiny little pulp and paper mill town, population about 7,800 people. And I have tons of family there still. I've got lots of cousins who are near and dear to my heart that still live in Dryden. But as a young person, I ended up leaving Dryden, but Dryden didn't leave me. And so one thing that I recognize about where we are born is often it stays with us for many years. And the rocks and trees and lakes of Northern Canada are really, really near and dear to my heart, and often show up in my writing as well. I am a career writer. I started writing when I was a tiny little girl, and I would climb up into the apple tree in my backyard, and I would write poetry, and I would write complaints about my big sister, and I would write little short stories. And it was just my favorite thing to do, was to be up in that apple tree writing. And that never left me either. And as I grew up, I ended up working for the Queen's Journal, which was my university newspaper. After graduation, I worked for a daily newspaper, the London Free Press. Then I went to Canada's national newswire service, the Canadian Press. I worked for Canada's largest provincial ministry, the Ontario Ministry of Health, as a communications advisor there. Again, lots of writing, PR materials, speeches. I did briefing reports for the minister's use, and it was all about writing. And then I ended up at a marketing agency and was a copywriter at a marketing agency for a number of years. Today, I run Crossman Communications, and particularly focused on the Awakening Author. It's part of our brand, where we offer book coaching and book editing services, as well as one-on-one and group programs to help people write books. So my dream had always been, much as it was to continue making my living as a writer, I wanted to write a book. And I kept saying that for many years. Gosh, I really want to write a book. I really want to write a book. Oh, one day I'm going to write a book. And finally, my husband at the time said, you know, you've been talking about writing a book for a really long time now. And I think he was getting a little tired of hearing about me wanting to write a book someday. And probably some of you have partners who might be in the same boat. And he asked me, though, the one question that was to change my life, which was, what's stopping you? And when I stopped to think about it, the only thing stopping me was me. So that almost embarrassed me into starting to write my first book, which was a novel. And it was a book about a woman's experience of an abusive relationship. And I was into a second marriage at the time. I felt that I knew a little bit about abusive situations, and certainly have met a lot of other people who find that that's an issue that's important. Interestingly, when I started writing that book, the statistics in Canada, at least, were that one woman was murdered by her domestic partner every 6 days. The figures are actually more serious in the United States, and I'm sorry I don't have them at my fingertips, but it was dramatically worse in the United States at the time. Now, just a month or two ago, I thought, well, I wonder if that's changed. So my first book came out in 2011. And I thought, what's happening now? And I'm very sad to report that one Canadian woman is murdered by her domestic partner every 5 days. So we're not going in the direction that we want to go in. And that's one of the reasons that my mission with my business is to promote peace on earth by helping people write stories that make a difference to people's hearts, that help us expand our sense of who we are, that contribute to harmony and peace and love and sunshine on this beautiful planet that we live in. There are enough people out there that are focused on making things not very happy for other people. And I feel that by supporting people who are writing books that will make a difference in people's lives, my team and I can really help move the dial in the direction that we want things to go. So that book, I started writing that first book, and I'll show you, here it is here, Shades of Teal. I started writing that book when I was pregnant with my family's fourth child. We were a blended family. And I figured, okay, you saw all my writing credentials. I'm a very comfortable writer. How hard can this be? And I'd been in my own way. I recognized, okay, I was stopping myself. So by the time the baby's born, then, 9 months to write a book, that seems like lots of time to me. But I set out, I started writing. I was in and out of the writing routine. But at the end of the 9 months, the baby came out and the book did not. And years went by. I had another child. We moved a lot. My husband's career was very erratic. Lots of really surprising things happened. And about 11 years later, my husband was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And 3 months later, he died. And that was a really traumatic time, of course, in our family. The youngest kids were 7 and 9 years old. One of the silver linings, if you want to call it that came out of that was I had to look at my life and go, uh-oh, what happens if I die before I find out whether I can finish this book and get it published? Because this is my life dream. I've been dreaming about this for decades. There is a clock ticking. And so that really galvanized me into action. It doesn't have to take that kind of a dramatic experience in order to get us in action. But that's what it took for me to get really serious about writing that first book. And so I did. I knuckled down. I really, aside from a million other things that had to happen in order to get my life and my children's life on track, I really, really focused incredibly deeply on getting my book written. And so that brings us to what our second transformation is. And I feel that our second transformation, is a transformation in our expectations of our future. So when, of course, hearing the news about my husband's cancer, suddenly my expectations of my future and my family's future had to change pretty dramatically. Part of that became getting serious about expecting a book in my future and expecting that I could do it. And so that really was a huge transformation for me. What it also did was it helped me recognize that I can do this. You know, if I really want to do it, I probably can. I don't know how, but it required me to dig very deeply and get the book done. And then the most amazing thing happened. And then I wrote 4 more books over the last 10 years. When I first published that, I'm traditionally published, so I was in doubt. It didn't dawn on me that I would write more books. The world, like I was really wrapped up in how exciting that was, until my publisher came to me and said, "Have you written any short stories?" And of course I had written some short stories. So the second book became a collection of short stories. And then the next year, the publisher came to me and said, "Well, you know, you've been writing a really long time. How about a book about how to write?" And then the third book came out, and I was doing content marketing, which was book number 4. And book number 5 is another content marketing book as well. So I couldn't conceive of being the author of multiple books when I started that first book, or even when I got that published. So my sense of what my future became a big transformation over what I was expecting it to be. And that has spilled over into a lot of other things for me. And these are just some little snaps from the life that I lead now, which was inconceivable prior to that first book coming out. But the top left corner, you've got me climbing in Sedona. There's a tiny little blue blob there down right here where the arrow is. That's me climbing up there. That was really fun. I've been to France. I studied Chartres Cathedral as a storybook for a week, just before the year before lockdown. Mexico, here's me speaking on stage at a rugby stadium in New Zealand. There's the zip lining. I've been on an Oprah Winfrey Network show. Lots of travels, lots of beautiful experience that are really fun. So that's my experience, and that's not just, you know, that's not just me that has a change in expectations of our future. This is what's lived through the Liberian Revolution and the Ebola crisis and so on. He wrote a book about his experiences as a journalist in Liberia. And when he was in Liberia, he wrote an article the government didn't like for his online newspaper, and ended up being arrested and convicted. And I can't remember what the exact charge was, but the sentence was 5,000 years in jail. And so Rodney's book is all about how important it is to protect our democracy. Now, Rodney, though, he travels all over the world giving talks and talking to other journalists around the world about the freedom of the press. He's all over the United States. He's got friends and family here. So his life has really turned around not that he had a terrible life before, but he's become much more of a celebrity. And he's not a celebrity. He's a very modest guy, but he's everywhere, this guy. And here's another one of my clients. Karen Furno is an Olympic athlete, and she competed in 2 Olympic experiences as a kayaker. And you kind of have to wonder, well, what does a former Olympian do? You know, for her whole life, she was focused on getting to the Olympics and competing in the Olympics. And then at a certain point, athletes don't go to the Olympics anymore. And Karen got to that point in her life where she had her completion with her Olympic experiences and decided she needed to do something else. And that something else was to create a life and a coaching business for young girls. So she now goes around I'm not sure if she's been too global recently because it's been COVID, but does a lot of speaking around how to help young girls empower their sense of who they are. And so Karen's future changed quite a bit as well when she got her book out there, and she's doing lots of really, really exciting things. So those are just, you know, some of the transformations that people experience when they've written a book. It's so exciting and so unexpected. I think that's the one thing about transformations is they are often really, really unexpected, the things that show up. We don't decide to write a book and suddenly our lives are transformed. And that was something I was really worried about too. I think when I was writing that first book, well, what if my life changes out of all recognition. And I didn't want to be the mother I wanted to be wanted to run my business. I wanted life to stay pretty much the same, except that I was a published author at that point. And so the evolution of my life since that first book has taken place in comfortable ways. Other silly things I do, like going Tarzan swinging, but that's all in my control too. The other thing that I'll say is, for writing, and I'm going to just share my screen again, when you're writing a book, there are discrete steps along the way that part of the transformation takes place over the process of writing your book, getting it edited, getting it published, getting it launched, and getting it marketed. So it's not that it all happens at once, it's that you're in control of everything to some extent all the way along, and you say yes to the experiences that you want to say yes to, and you say no to the experiences that you don't want to say yes to. So you are expanding your sense of who you are. And that brings us to kind of the third transformation that we have. Where did it go? Yeah, the third transformation is a transformation in our sense of community and our place in it. So going back to this slide, writing is usually kind of a solitary experience. We have writing groups. There are opportunities to be part of communities as writers, and I highly recommend people be part of writing groups. I've been part of some really fabulous writing groups in my life, and I've really benefited from that community of, you're kind of alone together in that process. Editing, you end up with a relationship with your editor. They're on your team. They're in your corner to help you with the process. So you have a bit of a community there. Publishing involves reaching out to different people and finding out about the different publishing options that are available. There are 4 main publishing options available to us these days. So you've got to educate yourself about which one is going to suit your model of the world. Launching your book, again, part of a community. You want to leverage your community in order to get the best launch possible, sell the most books. The Amazon bestseller campaigns are very popular these days, and really what they're about is leveraging your network so that you can get the most sales on Amazon in a specific window of time. And then finally, marketing your book. Marketing your book is about community as well. And so there are a lot of different things that happen in that transformation to a different community and a bigger community. And I'd love to tell you just one more story. This is a Jumbotron image of me speaking at the Forsyth Bar Stadium in Dunedin, New Zealand. And that's kind of a strange thing for someone to end up doing, is speaking on stage at a rugby stadium. So here's what happened. A friend of mine had booked a trip to go on a speaking tour of New Zealand. And as it turned out, she couldn't go. There were snags in her. She was applying for her green card in the United States, and she couldn't leave the country. And so here she had she'd booked this experience, and she needed somebody to take over the ticket. And so she wondered if I wanted to do it. And as it happened, I had set aside some money for a basement renovation. And long story around that, but I thought, well, the basement renovation can wait, but I mean, the trip to New Zealand, like, who gets it? And it was a really good price and speaking tour. And part of it was going to be to give a speech on stage at a rugby stadium. I mean, who gets to do that? Like, it scared me to bits, but I thought that might be kind of fun too. So I said yes to this terrifying trip, took the money out of my basement renovation little kitty, my little piggy bank. And there I was. We went to New Zealand. There were about 40 people in the group that traveled around New Zealand for 2.5 weeks. I had a luging experience down a mountain in New Zealand. Said yes to that. Can't believe I did. I'm still here, so nothing bad happened there either, surprisingly. And oh my goodness, we spent a week with an Aboriginal community and learning their ways and being steeped in the connection with the land that the Waitaha people of New Zealand have. And of course, the big moment was to be giving a TED type talk, is what it was, on stage at Forsyth Bar Stadium. So one of the really fun things about that was the expansion of my community. And it's not that I couldn't have done that if I weren't a published author, because of course, some of the people on the trip had never written books either. But one of the really interesting things about becoming a published author is that you command bigger stages and you have opportunities to pit yourself against yourself, really is what it came down to me, and kind of convince yourself to get on these bigger stages that become available to you as you're expanding who you are. But you don't have to do it alone. And I think that's the thing that I used to believe, that writing was always going to be a lonely thing and a lone thing. And what I've discovered is actually it's been an amazing opportunity to expand my community. And so there I was in New Zealand for these 2.5 weeks. I met people from all over the world. It was really fun. And again, about stepping into a transformation of our sense of community and our place within it. So I was definitely scared. I've been scared a lot in this business journey that I've been on. I wouldn't be human if I weren't. And it, certainly felt very vulnerable a lot of the time and not knowing which way to turn. It's the human journey. It's the hero's journey. It's the virgin's promise. All of what we are engaged in as writers and as authors is about those transformations that are available to us. And it's exciting. And I think the big thing is we don't know where our writing journey is going to take us. And even as an author, you write that story, where your character is at the beginning. You take them on a journey and land them somewhere else at the end. You're driving all of that. Other than I find my characters have a mind of their own quite often, and they'll surprise me because they end up doing things that I didn't think they should do. Like I've had that experience. A lot of other writers have, where the characters just kind of take over. So, but they do end up in a different place. They do evolve. There is a transformation. I feel there are 3 transformations, even in the hero's journey and the virgin's promise. As an author, however, we're not in charge of all of it. Like we make our decisions step by step, but we can't predict where we're going to end up. And I find that really intriguing, that whereas as the author of a story, we determine where our characters end up. As the author ourselves, we aren't ever really sure where we're going to end up. And I think it's one of the really exciting things about being a writer is that there are so many surprises out there waiting for us, that we can all just kind of maybe step back and enjoy the journey and trust that it will take us on exciting and delicious adventures along the way. So that's about all I had to say today. What I would love is if everybody could put a word in the chat box now about how you're feeling about your writing. And let's see if there's been a transformation in any of that. Do it scared. Pit yourself against yourself. Yeah, inspired. Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Emma. Yeah, Irma. Yeah, pit yourself against yourself. We are our own worst enemy. We stop ourselves from doing the things we really want to do. So, and everybody to ask that question. If there's something you want to do that relates to your writing, ask that question. What's stopping you? As usually it's me. So thank you, everybody. Thank you for your time and your attention. Thank you to Steve and Olivia and Irma for this wonderful opportunity to be here, and happy writing to everybody. If we have questions, I'm happy to stick around. We got a few minutes. If anybody has questions, Steve and Olivia, yes, awesome. Thank you.
Irma is our timekeeper, so.
Ooh. Oh, good. Am I still on the right side of the timekeeper? In your good books, 5 minutes left. Yay. Wonderful. You're welcome, everybody. You're welcome.
Susan, we've had quite a number of conversations about the writing journey, and I was really thrilled that you brought in the Virgin's Promise discussion, and which honestly I think it fits my story, my personal story, more so than the hero's journey does. But every time I hear you speak, or even when I heard you interviewed on a friend's podcast, your story gets richer. There's just so much great content there, and I love.
Thank you.
hearing it, and it's not just, I mean, it's wonderful that you are who you are and you've had the experiences that you've had, but that it's such rich material for, I love the words that were expressed in the second question, inspired, enthused, encouraged, enriched, etc. We all feel enriched because that you shared your story and shared your journey of your own author's journey, so that we who aspire to do so know that what is possible, and for us to see what we might not be able to see from this point in the journey.
Well, thank you. Yeah, we can all do it. We can. It's easier for some people than it is for others. And that's, I think, what it sounds like, a bigger mountain than it maybe really is. It isn't, I don't think writing a book is snap your fingers and it's done. I'm a big believer in the craft of writing, and craftsmanship in any area requires investment. Investment of your emotional self, of your intellect, of your experiences, and we mine our experiences and our sense of who we are in order to write. And to me, that's not something that happens overnight. Like it's like a good tea has to steep for a while before it's really good. It's like that with a book. A book steeps. We are the teapot in a way for our stories. They steep within us as we are creating them, and then eventually they're ready, and we pour them out onto the page, and then we revise and we edit and we rewrite, and it's all a process. So
that's a beautiful analogy.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. Isn't writing fun, everybody? Aren't stories fun?
They are fun. It can also be really, really frustrating, but it's also really.
Oh, well, that goes without saying.
But I think one of the reasons it can be so rewarding is because when we push past the frustrating points and get to the really good points, that the good points are even better because of the frustrations we've experienced along the way.
Well, and I think what it took me 13 years to write that first book. And I think what that really taught me was, of course, I was fully in my own way. I wasn't committed. I didn't know I could do it. And I think that's the biggest thing that stopped me, was I didn't really believe I could. Now I've written 5 books. I know I've got this handled. Like, I can do this. Not that I'm working on my 6th one. I'm trying not to tell people because I don't have much to show for it right now, but I know I can do it. I've proven to myself I can do it. With that first book, you haven't got any evidence that you can do it. And I think that makes a big difference for people. For your second book, you can say, oh, yeah, look, here it is. I've proven I can do this. So I guess I can do it. The other thing that I've discovered is, with that first book, we do not have a neural network in place in here to support our book writing. We haven't got a skill set around it, and we don't have the brain neurology in place, the neural network that it's like when you're riding a bike. The first time you ride a bike, you don't have a neural network in place for bike riding. After you've done it 100 times, it's just, you don't even need to hold on to the handlebars. Like, you've got this handled. Book writing is exactly the same thing. If you've never written a book, you don't have a neural network in place. So be patient with yourself. You are building the neural network, and you'll get there. It's just those little neurons need to create a highway in there in order for, and that takes repetition and practice, and just keep at it. And it's magic, but it isn't. It's just science.
I find that really interesting. And one of the things that colors my listening to what you just shared is reading the book Daily Rituals, which looks at, 100 different artists of different types, and, numerous writers, and they all approach their writing craft in a different way. There isn't like one highway that you take from this point to this point. It's like, okay, well, we start out here and we go here and we go here. And so we're developing our own neural network as we go through the process. Yeah.
And that's what I really reinforce that with people in my programs is, you know what, you've got to figure out what works for you. I can tell you what works for me, and I can share that, happy to share the things that I do, but you've got to figure this out for you because you're unique and you're the only person through which that story can flow. So the world won't have that story till you get it out for us, and we're waiting. You know, we want to read that. So yeah,
Thank you.
so that's yeah, we want that. We want your stories. And that's the other thing that I really reinforce with the people that I work with too, is, you know, people often say, well, who's going to read my story? Like, has this all been done before? Hasn't it been written before? And that's a really common concern. And my response to that is, well, actually, no, because nobody in this world was born into the family that you were born with, you know, in the birth order that you were born with, the aunts and uncles that you've got, the cousins, the parents, the school experiences, the, you know, that time you fell down and skinned your knee and nobody helped you and there was blood everywhere, and that wonderful time when a stranger helped you find your parents when you were lost, and the friends that you've had in school. No one else has had the training experiences or the work experiences and the colleagues and the lovers and the relationships and the friends. Like, all of that is unique to you. The trials and tribulations, you're the only person with that constellation of experiences. And so the story that you're telling is being funneled through all of those filters, and nobody else has the same collection of filters that you do. And so, of course, the story you're telling is unique. It can't help be unique. It is, just because you are a very, very unique human being. And so that story is unique. You're telling it your way. And that's, I just think that's one of the magical things about working with authors, is that there are no two stories that are exactly alike, or there shouldn't be, or otherwise we're plagiarizing. So we don't want to do that.
That's excellent.
Thank
you. And I'm noticing Irma has got us with the bright red, so I'm going to stop